Good afternoon, one and all. So, with the kind permission of all the panelists today, shall we proceed with the discussions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, again, good afternoon to one and all present here. We have in consultation and in active support from the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, we have been doing this webinar series in order to effectuate our understanding of the position of the transgenders in India, as well as outside India, especially in India with reference to the Transgenders Act 2019, read with the Transgenders Rules 2020. So this is the eighth deliberation, and today's focus is on the social and the legal status of transgender persons in India, with reference to of course, the 2019 Act and the rules. And without much ado, I would request Major General. I'm sorry. Major General retired P.K. Sharma Sahab, Professor and Director, Dean, Faculty of Law, Amity University, Haryana, to discuss and deliberate on the critical social and the legal issues facing the transgender persons in India. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Rajat. This is something very, very new. Not only I would call the topic as new, but I would say the act is still in its nascent stage. 2019, the act was passed, and to January 2020, it got the assent. So notified in January, and thereafter the government formulated the rules in 2020. First and foremost, change is always resisted. And secondly, to visualize the change in their legal and social status, I think about 2 years' time is very little to see the effect. It is going to take time. Things are materializing, have been materializing even before the this act came into being. We have very wise people here, so I don't actually want to discuss in length, but we all know the transition from Naz Foundation to Suresh Kaushik to the so-called Nalsa judgment to Puttaswamy's judgment, and then finally Navtesh Johar. So things have been changing even before the act came into being. And I have made a small PPT, if it is okay with the panelists and the participants. Can I share the PPT? I'm not going to take much time. It's a very small PPT that I had prepared. Is it okay if I share the PPT?
Yes, sir, please. Yes,
Thank
sir,
you.
please go ahead, sir.
Can you see the PPT?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Right. So what is generally, as a common man, we have only, we feel that gender and sex is one and the same thing. Sexual orientation and gender identity are often misunderstood as similar concepts. And that is where the problem arises, and that is where time and again there has been a call for such law. It is not only nationally, but at the international level also. See why these gay parades and pride parades take place in various countries. The reason is, even there was a misconception about gender and sex, and generally people felt these two terms to be synonymous. So we all know that gender refers to the what is socially construed characteristics ascribed to a man or a woman, while sex is your biological characteristics. So we are not to get confused with between gender and sex. Now, if you see, the term has been defined by Section 2K. I do not wish to delve into it because in your previous webinars, I'm sure you have discussed the law at length. So, what is happening is that the transgender persons are being they are individuals whose sex appearance does not are not the same as their personal characteristics, and the behavior differs from the stereotypes that we know. He's a man, he must have those sexual organs of a man. Woman must have, whereas a man may be feeling like a woman and a woman may be feeling like a man. So the law has tried to define the term transgender by Section 2K, and this discrimination primarily has its foundation in the cultural and social environment, and the primary hurdles in achieving gender equity and equality remain the attitudinal biases of the society. The societal mind has to change, and then only we will achieve. No law per se can achieve it, but the attitude of the society per se has to change. Now, why did we need this act? As I mentioned to you, the growth has been from the various judgments which our honorable courts have been delivering from time to time, taking into consideration our society, taking into consideration at the international level. And it has always been felt that there has been marginalization, social exclusion, and impact even at the family level. It's become so difficult for the parents to understand that their son is a daughter is a transgender. So the outcasting starts, the discrimination starts at the family level only. It's like a stigma, and you get excluded from the whatever support system is there. The person does not get the rights that generally should be available to a man or a woman. You are a man, you are a woman, a transgender. It is therefore there was a need to recognize it as a third gender. So the act recognizes the identity of transgender persons and prohibits discrimination in the fields of education, employment, healthcare, holding or disposing of property, holding public or private offices, and access to and use of public services. There are a large number of transgenders who are now occupying various fields. I will be showing you a few pictures also to you. So what the term, even though defined by the law, it's an umbrella term for persons whose gender identity, gender expression, or behavior does not conform to that typically associated with the sex to which they were assigned at the time of birth. Just go very briefly, if I go, I'm not going to be dealing with the sections per se, but if you see these are few important ones. Section 3, it prohibits against discrimination. So in all fields, strictly prohibits discrimination of transgender persons. Educational or professional institutions, healthcare and public facilities. This is very important because they face a lot of problems in healthcare and public facilities. There have been violent actions in public toilets. They would not know where to go. And if they entered the male, they were beaten up there. If they entered, they were hue and cry. So these are certain things which the law is saying it cannot be permitted. Then it enforces their rights to free movement, property, holding of public offices. Section 4 is recognizing the identity of the gender persons. So whatever they perceive themselves to be will be their gender identity, and the rules that have been framed, the district magistrate is supposed to be issuing a certificate when they apply for it to be given a particular identity. Section 8, it administers equal opportunities regarding the policy matters for the transgender community, and mandates the formulation of certain specific policy measures that would be inclusive of transgender persons. See, it is very beautifully worded, but then the term includes the appropriate government. The law defines the appropriate government, which is central government and the state government. The central government has made the act, it has made the rules, but at the state level, certain actions are required to be taken. Now, if those actions are not taken by the state governments, then these policy measures cannot be made for them, for the transgender persons. And there are a number of states, to my understanding, who are yet to implement those provisions of the Act. Section 16 mandates the constitution of National Council for Transgender Persons. It has been, the central government has notified it. It is supposed to guide and advise the government officials for auditing of existing policies and formulation of new ones. So, but as I said, unless all state governments and the central government are on the same track, on the same platform, it is very difficult to formulate policies and implement these policies. Now, see, coming to the changes that we are talking about, this is a very, very recent activity, and shared by nothing less than the Honorable Railway Minister himself. The Guwahati railway station, about 3 or 4 days back, this trans tea stall has been inaugurated by the North Frontier Railway, chairman of the North Frontier Railway, and the Honorable Minister himself tweeted it, which is showing the change of mind, which is probably, in addition to the law, the society is also considering the change. Now, what is the law wanting to change socially and legally? So you can see these posters. I don't think these are from India. All around the world, they are facing this discrimination. So while the act is a positive step, but you see, what happens is, sometimes in 2011, census was carried out. And how many? They said there are only about 488,000 transgenders, which is not correct. The 43rd report of the Parliamentary Committee in 2017 said there are 19 lakh inox. I don't think that's underestimation, because people are hiding it. People are not coming out with it. So the families are hiding it. So unless the proper number is available, unless of the transgenders, then it becomes difficult for the government to formulate policies, implement policies. So the Act provides for recognition of as the third gender, thereby adhering to the international standards. The Human Rights High Commissioner of the Human Rights also, this is one of the part of the international standards. The Act is providing for equal opportunities in all spheres, all departments, in everything under the government has been instructed that you will not discriminate. So then, coming to the penalty, these are, to my mind, the punishment is very low. For the same type of offences, if I go to the other criminal laws, if I go to the IPC, up to life imprisonment. Whereas here it is just about not less than 6 months, but may extend to 2 years, which is highly insufficient. But probably because they have now been identified as third gender, so in relation to third gender, if we consider as offences, the punishment has been provided. This, to my mind, would need a change. Now, we are talking about the social change. This is probably what they've been, the act and the rules provide for giving them a transgender identity certificate by the district magistrate. Now, government has launched a portal consequent to the act. The government has launched this portal, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, in November 2020. It provides a trans person a comprehensive platform for acquiring an ID. Good terms to use: comprehensive platform. For the time being, till such time all states make the provision for online, it is in person, and they are required to be submitting certain documents for making this getting this ID card made. Now, they are not educated. There is a need for a residence certificate. There is a most of them would not be staying at one place. Most of them may not be having a resident proof per se. So it becomes very, very difficult. And as late as about a year back, just about 6,000 cards were issued. Now we are talking about transgender numbers into lakhs. But as I told you, my view is it is very early to be going into the benefits having been provided to a large number of people. It is going to take time, but the changes are certainly taking place. They are there are financial difficulties. There is lack of digital awareness and presence. Just about 10 to 15% may be aware of these digital devices. You see the large number of them at crossroads. You don't. They're coming up, but it is very, very difficult. So the affordability and technical knowledge are two biggest barriers for transgender persons' digital literacy. This has to increase. The availability of the welfare schemes will come when they have those identity cards. So that's what I was saying, that all state governments must join hands, devise means of online. Otherwise, they have to spend money, engage a council, go to a court, appear before a magistrate, make the application. So all those sort of things need to be improved. They are improving, and therefore you see this photograph depicts they are proudly showing their card. So and another problem that comes for the issue of the ID card is the age, 18 years. So that means unless the parents below 18 years, the parents are required to give the consent. So the parents may feel shy. Parents may feel outcast that they have a transgender person. So these are problems which I'm sure the present law is going to deal with in gradual manner. So in the social status, that was the legal. In the social status, it is prohibiting discrimination at the educational professional institutions. There are transgender persons are now taking admissions in various institutes. They have the freedom to profess one's perceived gender without the fear of social ostracization. Yeah, it is still there. it is still there. We know our society. It is going to take time. But yes, things are changing. The social status is changing. The families have to come forward. The family must be the strongest support. There should be no inhibition. And then, of course, the social status will change. With the family support, with their education, with their getting jobs, their economic stability will enhance, and they will be part of the normal society. Now, see these, I'm just sharing a few pictures. These are the persons who have achieved the social status without the act having come into force, right? There has been no dearth of discrimination and harassment. Despite that, these brave transgenders have fought all the hurdles and come up to this. Akai Padmashali, her accomplishments are huge. She was invited by the president to attend the Chief Justice of India's swearing-in ceremony. And she has founded her own organization on the day. Similarly, if I talk about Yashini, she the Madras High Court directed the Tamil Nadu Uniform Service Recruitment Board to appoint her. So she's the first transgender police officer at the rank of sub-inspector in Tamil Nadu. So things have been changing gradually. Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi, I think she's one of the most well-known person. She's a highly accomplished classical dancer. And she's been regularly appearing. She's going and delivering lectures at various national and international forums. I don't know if you people watch Kapil Sharma's show. It's a comedy show where she appeared along with Akshay Kumar, and she narrated what all she faced before getting into prominence. But she said, "Bang on regardless. Let people say whatever is there." So she has really been doing well, both socially and legally. See, Manabai Bandyopadhyay, she is the first transgender, she's the principal in a West Bengal school. Padmani Prakash, she's a news reader, as you can see, AIR and Lotus News. She and her programs are liked by people in Tamil Nadu very much. Rose Venkateshan, she hosts a show which is very, very prominent. And so these people have also faced discrimination, but they have stood firm. And even prior to the law coming up, they have done. So law is definitely going to help them. Madhubai, the first transgender mayor in Raigad, Chhattisgarh. So this is something very, very great that our people are doing. The law is bringing social change. It is bringing change in the legal status. They'll be able to acquire property. They'll be able to live a very decent life, a life which they perceive is good for them. Right. So from my side, this is all. If you want, I can stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, sir. Indeed, it is a great pleasure. I, Suparna Vinayak, Assistant Professor of Amity Law School, welcomes Aditya Thomas, sir, who has also witnessed such a wonderful presentation by Major General P.K. Sharma, sir.
Thank you.
So you said it so correctly on the social and legal status, where you have started with the clear term. That's how we have to go with the presentation of our identity, where you emphasized upon the gender and the sex. The terms must not be confused and which is often going with the same as students and other people are not able to identify the difference between two, which is very prominent for us also. The term is itself defined under Section 2, Clause K of the Act of 2019, which is very vital for us to go with the identification in difference of learning the impact of the gender or the sex. Your emphasis on the objective, which goes with the recognition of the transgender, has led the identity clear recognized, and it has prohibited the discrimination. Specific sections dealing with section 3, 4, 8, and 16, going with the prohibition against discrimination, recognizing the identity, administering the equal opportunities, along with the Constitution of National Council for Transgender Persons, respectively, is elaborately dealt, and that's how we have to go with the adjudication when it comes to the legal recognition. Your pictorial representation has also led us very clear about the discrimination. Certainly, the act itself is a positive side and rule of the act, which has further established us also for the identity. Your further recognition to prominent transgender who are not dependent on this legislation also. So that is also clear by mentioning about K. Pritika Yashini, who is the first police officer of Tamil Nadu, along with Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi, amongst others. So this is a clear picture how social aspect is also being taken up along with the legal provision to assure that this was something which is to be acceptable in present era also. Thank you so much, sir, for such illustrious man. I extend my thank you to you. Now, going with the second, I would like to request Aditya Thomas, sir, who is our additional HOI of Amity Law School, Noida, to go with his blessings also for the webinar series. Please, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suparna. Though I'm late to join, and welcome to our dignitaries. First of all, I would like to thanks to Major General P.K. Sharma, sir, who just got the invitation very late, sir, but you accommodate us. Thank you very much. Just to raise the occasion and enlighten the student and the faculty member with your intellect. I would like to extend my heartiest welcome to Dr. D.K. Giri Sahab. Thank you very much, sir. Professor Dr. Asad Malik Sahab, our very dear Dr. Jain and Dr. Akida. This is again a happiest moment, and I would like to opportunity to wish to our colleague Dr. Akida Khan, who just before the webinar got promoted to associate professor to professor. So congratulations, Dr. Akida, and most welcome to all the dignitaries and all the attendees who are attending the program through the webinar Zoom and the YouTube. So I would like to extend my heartfelt welcome and thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for showering your best wishes. Amity Legal Aid and Literacy Committee, Amity Law School, Noida, Amity University, Uttar Pradesh, in collaboration with National Institute of Social Defense, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India, organizes a series of webinars on Transgender Persons Act 2019 and Rules 2020. In this, we are going with another speaker's address. Sir, we'll be going with the Nitin, sir. All right, we'll be going with the welcome of Professor Dr. Muhammad Asad Malik, who is Faculty of Law, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. Sir has studied law in MJP Rohilkhand University, Bareilly, and PhD on the state liability and tort, a case study of India from Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. He has more than 20 years of experience of teaching and research. Sir has taught constitutional law, comparative constitution, administrative law, law of tort, criminal procedure code, comparative criminal procedure, criminal justice administration, jurisprudence, professional ethics, clinical course, amongst other law courses. Sir, I welcome you at this platform to address us on the Transgender Persons Act 2019 and Rules 2020 on its socio and legal provisions. Sir, over to you, please.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to congratulate to MIT Law School for organizing this webinar on this very relevant topic, and particularly so far as this efficacy of this particular subject. And respected panelist, respected director, dean, all the colleagues, professors, that as the topic of the today's webinar is the social and legal status of the transgenders, particularly after the 2019 Act. And I also congratulate Akida for promotion, and we are waiting for party. As the topic is related to the transgender, I am going only to discuss the aspect because Professor Sharma already has discussed the provisions as well as the social status of the transgenders. Actually, all we know that basically this community discriminated a lot. When we will see Article 1 of the UDHR, which clearly talks about the all human beings are born free with dignity. So Universal Declaration giving the right to equality to all. We will come in the Constitution of India, that preamble says the equality of status and of opportunity and to promote among them all. When we will see Article 14, that also talks about the equality before law and equal protection of law. And then Article 15, which also prohibited any kind of the discrimination on the ground of the religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth. I mean, number of the provisions are there in the Constitution of India, which clearly talks about the equality. And also we know that the God has created the human beings as equal without any kind of the discrimination as to their skills, willpower, intellect. But it is the human being who discriminated and misused and abused the human being and basically treat them as an object, and fault lies only with the selfish nature of the human being. So actually we are labeled as a male and the female as per the identification, particularly in the hospitals, doctor told that the male or female, but nobody talks about this, and nobody knows even about the third gender, and they were discriminated in different names were given. When we'll see the history, either the periods, then different periods and number of the movies also were there with respect to the transgenders. But basically in our country, particularly after the judgment of the NALSA, when the first time the Honorable Supreme Court of India recognized the third gender as a gender, and in detail the Supreme Court of India issued the guidelines with respect to the protection of the community and how to provide them that they should also lead the dignified life as guaranteed by the Constitution of India under Article 21 of the Constitution. So this is the judgment. And after this judgment, when we'll see number of the issues or number of the things done by the different government, even before the enactment of 2019 law. As we know that third gender, which was first time allowed to be used by the NALSA, but as we know that in 2005, passport application include the third gender. And also the Unique Identification Authority of India also recognized the third gender in their form before this judgment. 2011 census was the first census when this other category was used. So it means the work done by the government, but after this judgment, there was basically obligation on the part of the government. I am not going to discuss all the provision. I am here only first section which I am going to cite, that is the section 8. Section 8 is obligation of the appropriate government, means it is the obligation of the government try to make effective participation of these persons and inclusion in the society. And at the same time, section 13, 14, 15, which is given there, this will be the responsibility of each and every appropriate government. At the same time, I would also like to mention the section 20, which talks about the provision of this act shall be in addition and not in derogation of any other law. To me, this is the additional benefit and the protection given to the transgender community. Whatever the laws, what are the benefits are there in the different laws, they will be entitled to get the benefit of all. So these clearly identify that how these laws will work. Another section which I am going to cite here, that is the section 16, which talks about the National Council for Transgender Persons. So means these are the certain provisions, and even the government of India or the different governments take the different initiative particularly to implement this particular law, that is the Transgender Act. And we know that the 2020, the transgender rules were also made. We all know that basically the law when made by the parliament, then the power can be exercised by the executive in terms of the rule making power, so that the law can be implemented effectively. So actually the other initiative which has been taken by the government other than this act, so for example, as just I cited that the rules have been framed under the that is the Transgender Persons Protection Act 2019. What was the basic objective? The rules actually seek to recognize the identity of the transgender and prohibit discrimination in the field of the education, employment, healthcare, and holding of disposing the property, holding public and private office, access to use of the public service. So basically, this was the basic objective of these rules. And then, as Professor Sharma also cited, that National Portal for Transgender Persons. Actually, this would help transgender digitally, as we are living in the digital era, applying for the certificate, identity card, whatever. So they can take the help of this and track the status of the application, FTS, you can say. And you know that the Garma Gireh, that was one of these Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, inaugurated the Garma Gireh, that is the shelter home for transgender person. And this scheme of the shelter home for transgender person include the shelter facility, food, clothing, and recognize this recreational facility, skill development, opportunities, yoga, physical fitness, library facility, legal support, technical advice for gender transition and surgeries, capacity building, transfer-friendly organization. So actually, when you will see this particular scheme include more or less everything which is included in the act for the purpose of giving the protection to the community and how to promote them, how to develop them, how to uplift them. So this everything that the ministry try to incorporate in this. And then they also, actually we know that during this COVID period also, number of the guidelines issued by the different courts for the purpose of giving the protections. In the prisons as well, the Ministry of Home Affairs sent the advisory to the head of the prisons to ensure the privacy, dignity of the third gender inmates. And this, because number of the transgenders, according to the 2020 NCRB data, there were 70 transgenders that were in the prisons. And Prison Act does not recognize, when we'll see the Prison Act 1894, does not recognize sexual minorities based on the sexual orientation. So here this issues the guidelines. Now I am coming to this basically obligation of the government. If the government is not fulfilling its obligation, particularly the state governments, for the purpose of the implementation of the laws, so basically we know that the being a protector and the guarantor of the constitution and the rights of the individuals and the citizens, the judiciary is supposed to come forward. So actually the law which was passed in 2009, number of the cases also filed in the different court. Reason is that actually there are two terms: legislative impact assessment. Legislative impact assessment means whenever any legislation is framed by the legislature, at the same time they have to assess the impact of that legislation. Impact in that sense, how many people are required for the purpose of implementation of that particular law, and how to deploy the people, what kind of the action, and what budget is required for the implementation of. How can we target the peoples to whom we want to give the benefit? So generally in our country, we lack this legislative impact assessment. Merely make the laws and then the people are going to the court for the implementation of their right. So here I am going to cite some of the judgment of the different courts where the court issued the direction for the protection of the rights of the transgender, particularly in the light of the NALSA, in the light of the 2019 Act, in the light of the 2020 rules, or in the light of the human rights and the fundamental rights that is protected under the Constitution of India. So for example, one of the judgment that is Bijanti Basanta Mogli versus State of Telangana, 2020. So in this judgment, Telangana High Court Division Bench, when addressing the petition, directed the state government for the purpose of that provide the free ration card to the transgender population without asking for ration or any kind of the card. So means where this petition was filed before the court of law, then the court said that you have to issue the ration without seeking any kind of the card. If they are lacking this card, don't have this card, so then you have to provide. And court issued a certain direction to allow these transgender persons to apply for provide the payment of the 3-month social security. The court also direct that the respondent to provide the free LPG cylinders. The court also direct that the respondent herein to extend this facility that is Arogya Shri government medical insurance that should be extended to the transgender people. And court also direct that to take the appropriate action against those who are targeting the transgender persons by falsely labeling them in public as a potential carrier of HIV. Most of the time the people pass the remark. The court said the strict action to be taken. And the court also direct that the respondent to place the moment that some kind of the orders, particularly directing the landlords, if they should not evict the transgender persons from existing rental premises. जो किराए पे रह रहे हैं उन्हें वहां से ना निकाला जाए. Then next, as we know, the section 4 of the act, which talks about the identity of the transgender. So one of the case which was decided by the court of law, that is Bombay High Court, Anjali Guru Sanjana Jan versus State of Maharashtra. Anjali Guru Sanjana Jan 2021 judgment. In this case, the court even cited the Act 2019 and permitted transgender to have a right to be recognized, and such transgender is permitted to have right to self-perceived gender identity. And here the court allowed a transgender to contest village panchayat poll as women candidate, because this section 4 giving this right to identity. And here the returning officer rejected the nomination paper on the ground that you are not come within the category of the women, but the petitioner cited that this is right is given to me by this act, and the court allowed that as a female candidate that the person is entitled to right. And you know that the purpose of the NALSA judgment to provide the benefits and the reservation, and Ministry of Social Justice also issued the certain guidelines. Then one of the case that is Miss Sumana Pramanik versus the Union of India, 2021. So Miss Sumana Pramanik, Union of India, the court, Calcutta High Court, issued the direction that the center to grant reservation or other benefit to the transgender person in the joint CSIR UGC NET examination. Court said if this reservation is not provided, it is unacceptable and it is a violation of Article 14 or Article 21 of the Constitution of India. So it means it reflects that how the judiciary or different high courts are coming and even providing the protection to the transgenders in the light of the existing law. And even you know that one of the case where the section 6 of the National Cadet Corps Act 1948 was declared unconstitutional, that it violated the Article 14, 15 and 21 because the transgender community excluded from this NCC. So this reflects that how the judges are sensitive toward the problems of the, and one of the most important thing is that Section 11 of the Act, which talks about to set up the grievance redressal forum. So one of the judgment, Pallavi Chakravarti versus the state of West Bengal. Pallavi Chakravarti, state of West Bengal, 2021. In this case, the court issued the direction to the Chief Secretary of the West Bengal to take immediate step to set up a grievance redressal forum and mechanism in the state in terms of the Section 11 of the Transgender Protection Act 2019. And the court said authority to enable her to participate in the selection process of the police constable instituted by the West Bengal. Actually, if the person having the grievances, where the person to approach. Section 11 provides the mechanism, but most of the state even did not constitute this cell. So in this case, the court issued the direction that it is necessary in the light of that judgment in that section, immediately it should be set up. Another, say this judgment, Pallavi Chakravarti, in this case also, the court direct the government to permit transgender to appear for the recruitment of the examination of the Kolkata police. As one of the example was given, madam also cited that this police recruitment in the police department. So here the court said yes. Now, as you know, the government of Gujarat, one of the case was filed, that is the Swati Bidhan Barua. Swati Bidhan Barua versus State of Assam, Guwahati High Court, 2021. In this case, the Guwahati High Court seeks the response on the health welfare measures undertaken under the Act, because Section 15 is talking about. The court asked, the PIL was filed in the court of law, and the court asked the government what measures have been taken in the light of the Section 8, Section 13, Section 14, or Section 15 of the Act. So here, the court even trying to put the pressure on the executive or the government for the implementation of this law. And another judgment, that Miss S. Sushma versus Director General of Police 2022. So Miss Sushma versus Director General of Police 2022. In this case, the Madras High Court that said that the Ministry of Social Justice Empowerment, that is over delay in enlisting of the NGOs working for the LGBTQIA community. It means here the issue was that the government should allow the set up these activities of the NGO so that they can work in this field. The court said that it is very sad that if you are lingering on this case. Next case, you can see that this where the court Matam Ganga Bhavani versus State of Andhra Pradesh. This is also 2022 case. In this case, a transgender has approached the court seeking the benefit of the reservation for the appointment of police department, which was denied by the court. Here the court said that it is the state is unconscious of the direction issued by the Honorable Supreme Court in the case of Nalsa and failed to provide a specific column meant for the gender identity for transgender in the pro forma for application in the notification which was issued for that purpose recruitment, and did not provide any reservation to transgender, and they are socially, educationally backward and not in position to compete with the ordinary men and women. So this reflects that the very good judgment was delivered by the court of. Next judgment, when you will see that, as I cited one of the Bombay High Court judgment, this is Odisha High Court judgment, that Kantaro Gondagiri versus State of Odisha 2022. In this case, the court ordered that the grant family pension to the trans women who was allegedly discriminated on the basis of her gender while allowing pensionary benefit after the death of her parents. So means it reflects that in spite of the laws, in spite of the rules, still the people are approaching to the court of law for the implementation of these provisions, and then they are getting the relief. Next case, you can see that sports. As you know, the sport is one of the most important activity, and everywhere there is a discrimination. So one of the case, Anamika versus State of Kerala, 2022. So Anamika versus State of Kerala, here the Kerala High Court passed the interim order in the petition of that in sporting events, in absence of a separate category for the transgender persons, they must be permitted to participate in their chosen category. So means the court said this transgender, irrespective whether there is a column for them or not, they will be allowed to participate in this process. Then you can say that this is clearly the court saying that Bira Yadav versus Chief Secretary, Government of Bihar. Here also the court said the state under constitutional statutory obligation to protect the transgender community from pervasive discrimination, because the objective of this law was only to provide them equality and no discrimination. Any kind of the discrimination should not be allowed. And next case, you can see that this is the Dhananjay Chauhan versus State of Punjab, 2022. Here the petition was filed, and Punjab and Haryana High Court, both the government, Punjab and Haryana government, agreed before the court of law to consider the plea for setting up transgender protection cells at the central level is already established, but here it was not. Then the court petition filed and government agreed. One of the case, this is the Samrat Bhattacharya versus Union of India 2023. Samrat Bhattacharya, Union of India 2023. In this case, the Calcutta High Court asked the authorities in the West Bengal to process the pending valid applications for issuance of identity card to the transgender person and decide the same within a month in accordance with the provision. So this court issued the direction to the government, as the government has to take care. And last case, that is the Jasmine Kaur Chhabra versus Union of India 2023. Jasmine Kaur Chhabra versus Union of India 2023. In this case, Delhi High Court directed the Delhi government to ensure that public toilets for transgender persons are constructed in the national capital within 8 weeks, failing which it will direct personal appearance of the top officials. So actually, this is reflecting that even the law is there, rules are there, and this is the obligation. It is mandatory on the parts of the government, but still I cited many other judgment also. Only some of the judgment I discuss here. So this reflects there is somewhere there is a problem in the proper implementation. That's why the people are approaching to the court of law for the enforcement of their right. It will be better if the government Somoto will initiate the proceeding. And I think here, as we know that the administrative relation, when we'll see the Article 256 of the Constitution of India or Article 257 of the Constitution of India, where if any law made by the central government, it is the obligation on the part of the state government to implement these laws. If these directions are not being followed by the state government, then under Article 365, the precedent rule can be imposed under Article 356. So even this is very important provisions. If implemented properly under the Constitution of India, the state government are subject under obligation to implement. So overall, this there is a lot of changes. As we know that before the NALSA or before the 2019, the position was, but now even we are discussing and even the courts are providing them relief. Even there is a pressure on the government if they are not doing it. But one more thing now, I am concluding my speech that this social is legal is social. As we know, the law is a tool of the social change. And with the changes of the time, that law is made and active. Social status, so when you will see, I personally, because I wrote one of the article in 2015 on this, when this judgment was delivered on the recognition of the rights of the transgender. Whenever I visit different places, in Delhi particularly, I saw in different places, number of the transgenders are increasing on the red lights and they are even begging. I don't know why this number increased. Earlier it was only in the Dwarka route, but now I saw many times when I'm going to India Gate also, then many a time this number is increasing day by day. So this is the responsibility of these NGOs or the government to take care, because it is the responsibility to provide them the facility. So why this number is increasing? It is a matter of concern. So actually we hope that the law is very good, but at the same time, there is a responsibility of the government, civil society, and then the result, the outcome will be good. And particularly when the awareness is also one of the points. As you know that this webinar series is being conducted by the MIT only for the purpose of making it more effective and make the people aware, so that the people should know, and these authorities who are involved, they should be aware about. And it is true that if the person is aware, then certainly the person will implement this particular law. Those are the executive authorities on whom the responsibilities lies. So the people, particularly those are executive, If they will be well versed with these rules, regulations, then certainly they will implement the law. Otherwise, unnecessary, there will be a burden on the judiciary, as I cited number of the judgment, and unnecessary the undue harassment of the person who is already one of the person facing the problem, and the person is approaching to the court of law for the redressal. So this will be a double-edged knife, because one side they already discriminated and this. So I think that it will be better, and in future that certainly we hope that we will be able to achieve the objective as enshrined in the particular act and the government initiative through the rules, and particularly the different high courts and the judge decisions are delivered by the court of law. And certainly when you people are doing this work, so certainly you will make the people more aware, and certainly the ministry will got benefit from these outcome which will come from your webinar. So once again, I would like to thank to the MIT Law School, all the teachers for inviting me or sharing my views with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Asad sir. Indeed, it is a pleasure listening you. In such a short span of 10 minutes, you were able to wind up with so many multiple judgments. I believe most of the students would have drawn the advantage from the multiple judgments. You're quoting with the Nalsa judgment and then going back to the provision that even if the law was not existing, still the provisions were incorporated for the transgender identity in the passport application and UIDA, Aadhaar card. Seriously, it is something which is required for the present time also. You emphasize on section 13, 14, 15 of the Act with reference to the responsibility of the appropriate government. Indeed, it is something which we must go with the responsibility, as these are the additional benefits which have to be extendable to the other allied provisions along with that is mentioned under section 20. Special emphasis on section 16, as you have said it, for the National Council. The further extensive provision by the scheme also, where Garima Greh is being there for providing shelter, food, clothing, skill development opportunities, and the legal facilities. Even at the time of COVID-19, sir, it is rightly pointed out that in the Prison Act of 1984, the Prisoners Act, that legislation itself is not recognizing the transgenders, but yes, the government's assurance towards that led into the privacy and dignity of them. Leading into non-compliance, then even the judiciary has to take the lead. And that's how you started with the multiple judgments quoting for the legislative impact assessment. And so you began with Bijayanti Mowgli case, which is with reference to the lagging of the ration card. Still, the extensive deliberation took place on that, and the court issued the directions for the same. Further to the social security measures and for the extension of medical facilities, followed by Anjali Guru Sanjana case, which has also led to the recognition of the rights and self-perceived identity. I think this is something on which we have to go for further, and further to the case of Somana of 2021, where you spoke upon the reservation of UGC and CSIR. Further followed by the Pallavi Chakrabarti case, which is also landmark case, which led into the setting up of the redressal mechanism. This is something for which we were looking upon, the grievance redressal, and followed by the Swati Bidhan case for the health welfare measures, emphasizing upon section 8, 13, 14, and 15, sir. You dealt extensively on Sushma's case also, Kantaru case, Mahatma Gandhi, Anamika, Dhananjay, Samraha Bhattacharya, Jasmine Kaur Chabra. Sir, the best part over here, I believe the students would have drawn the advantage, like I as a moderator drew it, because of going with the multiple announcements of the case title. That is very important for a student to go with the citation, and sir, you did it extensively. I think with this, you have rightly concluded that law is a tool for social change. Certainly, it is a responsibility of ours, our government, to take care of the same. Thank you so much, sir, for extensive deliberation on this.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I now invite Dr. Nitin, sir, who is Assistant Professor and Convener of the webinar series of Amity Law School, Noida. Because of him, this webinar is able to get it into execution with the joint collaboration of Ministry of Social Empowerment, Justice, Sir, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India. Nitin sir, I request you to address us. I think he is not here again. I'm so sorry for the same. I'll be calling him again for the address, special address. Because of him, we are able to hold these webinars. Rajat sir, over to you, who is another moderator for the session.
Thank you, Suparna ji. Thank you so much for introducing me. Actually, I was one. So both of us are moderating the session, and we have already heard two brilliant presentations, and really need on the legal and the social status of transgender persons, especially with reference to the Transgenders Act 2019 and the rules made thereunder in 2020. Without much ado, I would request the third speaker, Professor Dr. D.K. Gire, to carry on with his presentation. But before I do that, I would like to introduce him. Professor Dr. D.K. Gire is a professor of international politics, and he is teaching their politics, history, and management in Jagran Institute of Management and Mass Communication. And he's a very well-known author, journalist, and a political analyst. And he has been an advisor to the center-left and the progressive groups, which are focused on path-breaking aspects relating to Indian politics. And he has been a protagonist of the tri-sector approach and a freelance political analyst. So with so much in the kitty, we are humbled and we are pleased to have Professor Dr. D.K. Gire amongst us. And I would request Professor Dr. D.K. Gire to take the floor. Stage is yours, sir. Thank you.
Sir, you are muted. Dr. Giri, you are muted.
So I was asking how much time you assigned to me, allocate to me. 10 minutes or?
Sir, as you please, sir, about 15 minutes. 15.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Amity Law School, for inviting me. Thank you for the introduction. I would self-introduce myself very briefly, because this session is also about self-definition of ourselves, including the transgenders. Yes, I'm a student of history, politics, and society, but certainly not of law. My only exposure to law is my straying into the court premises occasionally as a witness to various public cases, or speaking occasionally in the MIT Law School. That is my brush with the law, but I certainly follow what is happening. I would pick up from the point concluded by my previous speaker. He seemed to imply that laws are there and law is a tool for social change, but it is the society that should reform and deliver justice to the victims of injustice. I remember the American theologian Reynold Niebuhr made a very profound statement about democracy, and the context for discussing this topic today is Indian democratic politics. Reynold Niebuhr said, "The man's capacity for justice makes democracy necessary." But the second line is more instructive. "But man's inclination to injustice makes democracy necessary." So man is capable of both. If you take the Hobbesian view, man is nasty, brutish, and short. And you take Gandhian view, there is essential goodness in all human beings. So we are talking today, the context is certain section of people who define themselves sexually differently are suffering in our society, are being discriminated against, are excluded, are denied their dignity, their identity. Can we give them justice? And there is an instrument called the law, which has just been passed to help them access justice. But we are saying that while law is being good, is it enough? That is the question. Whether law itself can deliver justice if society is hostile, unequal, and insensitive. What is the dynamic between law and a society? As a student of politics and society, I would like to dial upon that. And to my mind, that's quite relevant today because my previous two speakers have alluded to the critical role of the society in delivering justice. It was said that law is a tool for social change. May I add, law also is a monitor of social progress and social behavior, and now even political behavior. If we do not have the courts, our parliamentarians, our politicians should go berserk, and there is evidence all around. You see, most things, even the judgments constituting majority in the House, the role of governors, the speakers, they're all brought to the tables of the courts. And another Indologist said that, American Indologist said that Indian democracy is thriving because courts are active. I happened to be in that meeting. I said, sir, it is the reverse. When the parliament declines, the courts become active, and the activism of the court commensurates with the decline of the efficiency of the legislatures, which is not good for a democracy. Parliament is sovereign. They should decide. They should formulate and execute laws. The courts are there to interpret them only when they are asked to intervene, when there is a major dispute. So panoply of laws, plethora of laws in a country also indicates the depth of illness in that country. Let me give you an example. The so-called mother of democracy, United Kingdom, does not have a written constitution. There is no constitution in United Kingdom. How is it called the mother of democracy? Because they have set standards, conventions, practices, which are worthy of emulation by successive generations. They don't rely too much on laws. The entire system is based on conventions, and they lean on conventions while taking a decision. Like we quote the judgments, and our professor from my former university quoted several judgments brilliantly. Coming to the topic today, I would raise 5 points very briefly. There was some discussion on gender and sex. There is profound confusion in our public discourse about terminologies. Not only about gender and sex, there is about meaning of participation, definition of need, definition of secularism, democracy. Confusion abounds across the country. If you ask parliamentarians today, what do you mean by secularism? I'm sure, do a survey. If the students of law school should do the MIT Law School and do a survey among legislators, I'll tell you, hardly 10% can explain what secularism means today. Major General Sharma was talking about, he nicely distinguished these two terms, gender and sex. I'll tell you a personal anecdote, which is hilarious and shocking at the same time. I was working in a development organization, and there were 21 organizations, head of the organizations, invited by a donor agency on a training on gender. And they were, mind you, they were doing gender projects, 21 of them. And noted gender expert in our country called us to a farmhouse in Meroli for a 2-day training on gender empowerment. For ethical and reasons and protocol, I'll not name the expert, but she said, before I could start my training workshop, may I ask you to tell me what you understand. Tell me in writing in 2 sentences, what do you mean by gender? And answers came, and I'll tell you 1.5 answers were correct. And rest 19.5 were wrong, who were given money to conduct projects on gender empowerment. 1 answer was correct of a young lady who had attended the program of the same expert before, and half answer was mine. So you rightly said, Major General P.K. Sharma, gender is a social construction of sex, how we perceive men and women, and how we treat men and women socially is what is gender. And when I was a student, all of you would remember, we had not only 2 genders, we had 3 genders in grammar: masculine, feminine, and neuter gender. You see? So, but things have changed. Words and meanings have changed. We need to revisit the meanings of the words. As the society progresses, meanings of the words also change. They're not static. So what gender meant then is different now. So when you say transgender, that is a wrong terminology. It should be called transsexual. We are identifying these people in terms of their sexual orientation, not gender. Okay, having said that, again, the sexual behavior is not new. We had homosexuals, we had lesbians, we had transgenders before, but they were, because it is not the mainstream social behavior, those attitudes and behavior were suppressed. People were shy in identifying themselves. It is not new. But now that societies are progressed and there are capacities and awareness for self-definition and self-expression, people are coming out to say, I am transsexual. So along with this progress in the society, when they identify themselves as who they are, they should be treated as any other human beings, and they should be given all the rights that other human beings get. But that's not happening. So the conclusion is that society has progressed in terms of information, awareness, self-assertion. At the same time, society may be regressing in terms of its social values. And let me illustrate this. The major problem, the fundamental problem in any society, and particularly in India now, is that societies are based on diversities, which are natural. All societies have diversity. India is more diverse, perhaps, than many other societies. Diverse in terms of language, religion, caste, identity, sexual behavior, you name it, ethnicity, race. Yeah, if I go to Northeast, I'm a foreigner in terms of ethnicity and color. So, but pluralism is an act of maintaining these diversities, but that's not happening. What is happening when I said society is not progressing, rather regressing? What is happening, unfortunately, is an emphasis on sameness, uniformity. One language, one religion, one society. Is that possible? If we take that attitude, is that desirable? If we take that perspective, then people with different orientation, sexual orientation like transsexual, or there are varieties of them, which Indians are not aware of, but it is called in an acronym, a very easily remembered acronym called quilt bag. So if you say each word describes a particular sexual behavior, queer, unisex, intersex, transvestite, lesbian, and all that. Anyway, we're not going to that. But the point is, if we deny pluralism in a society, we'll also de-recognize the existence of such segments of people. We are talking today of sexual orientation, the transsexual people, which is a special lower social category. I'll come to that, why their discrimination is cumulative. But talk about religion today. Why we're talking of freedom of religion and belief today? Because people with different beliefs are discriminated. So discrimination is continuing or is prevailing across the sectors, not only on different sexes. So let us get it right that pluralism is an essence, a fundamental principle that we should embrace and maintain our diversity. Point number 2, or 3 rather, question of human rights. How conscious are we of human rights? If the premise is that transsexual people, people with different sexual orientation are human beings, that very few people will deny. They are human beings. If they are human beings, they should be entitled to and access all the human rights that is granted to them nationally and internationally, period. Why should we come up with different laws for their protection and discrimination? Fair enough. The diversity in society is layered, so we might require specific laws to address the problem in a particular segment of the society. I give that. But human rights should cover all the problems of any segment of the society. Easier said than done. So welcome the law that has been promulgated vis-a-vis the transgenders. I was talking about the cumulative discrimination. That is my next point. If you look at the social stratum of these people, you would say they are mostly from lower class and poor. Somebody was talking about them begging on the streets. Yes, most keeners beg on the red light areas. But if a transsexual person is of upper echelon, then discrimination is less. You would remember a IPS officer called Sam Panda, who was a senior IPS officer, who was wearing a sari. He called herself Radha. I knew that person because I am saying C, because that's what he would like to be called. He happened to come from my state, an IPS officer, and he was posted in UP. They removed the person from service because the IPS rules would not allow that. But the person was not discriminated because he was high up in the social ladder. He was an IPS officer. But when the people are destitute, poor, marginalized, then their discrimination becomes worse. So what we need to do in order to alleviate the condition of the transgenders, certainly the law is an enabling condition that is provided. We need to also alleviate their economic and social status. Someone was showing, I think it was Major General again, of different positions they occupy, these transsexual people in the society. Somebody is a mayor, somebody is a police officer, and all that. So if social and economic status improves, their sexual identity also will be less vulnerable. People talked about the lacuna in the law, the gaps that are being detected now. And the major one, I would say, as a student of society and politics, that at every stage when the law was formulated, that is unfortunately not the practice in our country, and not so in the recent times, is to consult the stakeholders. And the primary stakeholder in this case is the victims themselves. And they are complaining. They were not consulted in the process of the formulation of the law or setting the rules. And that is unfortunate. I know that there are committees in the parliament when they call for public hearing and public petitions and public representations while they make the law. The committees do that, but that practice is not seen anymore. I mean, what to talk of the stakeholders, even the parliamentarians are complaining that they were not consulted before the law was passed. So that is not a very welcome development in parliamentary politics. I mean, in the Kashmir Act, while many people would support it, many opposition parliamentarians were complaining that it was done in a hush-hush manner, or it was bulldozed into the parliament, and the parliamentarians across the party were not taken into confidence on such an important change in our law. So there are many such complaints and grievances that should be eliminated. The stakeholders, the primary stakeholders should have been consulted. But in any law, as you begin to implement it, you detect gaps and the gaps should be met up. That they should be changed, and it has happened in many laws. I remember the anti-defection law, which when it was passed, it had one shape. Now it has changed, and it will need further change to stop defection from one political party to another. It was 1/3, then it became 2/3. Then people resign and then face elections and get re-elected. So anti-defection needs to be revisited again. For that matter, any law has to be revisited to rectify the lapses. In my last point, I would like to make a few suggestions that need to be taken into the implementation of the law and addressing the issue that we are discussing today, the status of transgender people or giving them parity and justice in society. Many commentators are talking about awareness. Yes, awareness is the beginning. One should be conscious of their rights. And many people in our country, including the law enforcement agencies, particularly at the lower ranks, are not aware of the laws. So legal literacy, legal consciousness is quite important. I did a small experiment when I was in the academic staff college in Jamia Millia Islamia. I would like to share this anecdote because this is instructive of the level of awareness amongst intelligentsia, let alone the common men and women. So I was doing a refresher course in Jamia Millia Islamia in the academic staff college on political science. And I asked the lecturers, there were about 40 of them, how many of you have a copy of the Indian Constitution in your possession? How many of you possess a copy of the Indian Constitution? Can you raise your hands? Only 2 hands went up out of 41. Then my second question was that how many of you have bought a copy of Indian Constitution which is available in any Jain store? And no hands went up. The 2 people who had raised their hands had borrowed those books from the library. So political science lecturer not having a copy of the Indian Constitution, I'm talking of 1980s, things might have changed. It's shocking. Likewise, people should be, and I think MIT Law School should launch in your own way, literally a literacy campaign amongst stakeholders. So awareness is important, but acting on the awareness that is the second stage. The discrimination are sometimes legal and sometimes informal. So discrimination at any stage should be curbed. Making a offensive remark, taking a jibe at a transgender, "Ye to kinnar hai, ye to hinjra hai," that itself is discrimination. Affront to a person's selfhood and the personality of the human being. So that discrimination, anywhere we see it, it need not be legal. It can be behavioral. It can be psychological. That should be stopped as we notice it. I found some reference that civil rights of the transsexual people were not given importance in the law. So rights on marriage, rights on adoption, etc. That should have been also dealt with. People are talking about reservation. Reservation is quite fashionable these days, demanding reservation, but I would put it differently, which the Americans call it affirmative action. Let's not call reservation, but having affirmative action in favor of people who are marginalized and discriminated is necessary in a structurally and in praxis an inequitous society. Our society is hierarchical as well as
Sir, you have gone mute. Dr. Giri.
Is my computer playing with me? Is it okay now?
Yes.
Sure. So I was saying, I'll repeat just one sentence, that in a hierarchical and unequal society, affirmative action is called for to create a level playing field, create social parity among unequals. And political philosopher said that to treat unequal people equally is grave injustice. So we have to be careful. Who are we dealing with? There was some talk about rehabilitation of the transsexual people. And the complaint was that they need not be sent to rehabilitation center. They have their families. They have their own community, and they should be allowed to resettle in their own communities, then taken into a rehabilitation center, which will give them dignity and perhaps psychological and social security. That leads me to last point called dignity. That's quite important. The Constitution is silent about dignity, but it's quite important that we should create a dignitarian society and should respect people for who they are. Because there's a dichotomy between dignity and status of the people. Honestly, people in high places also suffer from indignities. Let me give you an example, and it's a very eloquent example. You will know all about it. K.R. Narayanan, who studied in London School of Economics, became the joined IFS, became the Vice Chancellor of JNU, Ambassador in the United States, Minister, Vice President, and President. When he retired from his presidency, a journalist asked him, "Sir, you achieved everything in life. All the positions, top positions that you could have thought of. What is your regret in life at this stage?" You know what K.R. Narayanan replied? He said, "My only regret is that I did not get the dignity from the society I deserved. I was always referred to as a Dalit president. I could not remove my Dalit tag after all my education, from London School of Economics to the president's house, being the first citizen, yet I could not remove that tag." That is the denial of dignity. The literal meaning of Dalit is who is oppressed. And K.R. Narayanan is not oppressed. He was our first citizen, or a prominent citizen, educated person. Why did you call him Dalit? Because he was born as Dalit. That is crass injustice. More than injustice is denial of his dignity. So let us give dignity to people, and particularly a vulnerable community like transsexuals who are abused, who are exploited by the vested interest. You hear so many cases of sodomy, exploitation, looting the money that beg on the street. I read in the papers, I met some people, giving them social security, psychological security, and human dignity that they deserve. So I think society and law together, law alone cannot do it, I agree, but society also cannot do it without the adequate and the requisite laws. Law are important in a developing society like ours. As I said, our society is developing and decaying at the same time. Development and decay go together. Decay meaning regression, go together. That is the law of history. Mao Zedong said that the more we progress one step forward or two steps backward, the more we progress, the more we come to the same place. So going back and going forward is the law of the nature. And we should see that this is the social growth is a ratchet growth, and we are not really falling back on the evils that we have experienced, social evils and social trauma that we have experienced, and this particular segment of society is experiencing. So my call to the students and the faculty and the society at large is to know about the law, implement the law consciously, and reform the society that would conduce justice, dignity, pluralism, and solidarity amongst Indians, then only the current slogan that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, world is a family, would fructify. But before we talk of the world as a family, let's talk of our own society and begin at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dr. D.K. Giri, for those insightful words. It was indeed a very important deliberation in the way you proceeded with the role of courts, and then you had referred to the examples, quoting the constitutional conventions of the United Kingdom. And finally, you had stumbled on one of the 5 critical points. The one critical point that you had referred to is the confusion with the nomenclature itself. And with the reference to, of course, there is a social obligation, but it is also a legal obligation on the part of the courts, the lawyers and the advocates and the judges to construe the words appropriately in order to avoid the confusion in the nomenclature and the usage of such, because the usage are sometimes so nuanced that actually that lead to further differences, actually creating further exclusivity. Moving further, you had referred to the second point, which is about pluralism, and you had rightly pointed out that until and unless the society embraces pluralism, it is absolutely not possible for us to translate the provisions of the Transgenders Act 2019 read with the rules to reality. The third point is all the more important, wherein you had focused on the human rights part, the relevance of creating a holistic human rights regime. Of course, we all of us, many of us are trying to do that, and it is not only that we can do through laws. There is a lot of social awareness as well as other forms of behavioral awareness, which are required in order to promote a holistic human rights regime, both nationally as well as internationally. The fourth point, which I found to be very, very interesting, was the cumulative discrimination part and the impending need to reverse such cumulative discrimination. And you had referred to the role of legal literacy and legal awareness, and an impending need, the looming need to bring changes in the behavioral and the psychological aspects of human beings in order to facilitate reversal of cumulative discrimination. Last but not the least, you had focused on the right to dignity. Although I would a bit sort of digress on the last point a bit, because our Constitution of India, especially Article 21, if you read down the provisions, the right to dignity is in fact contemplated within the meaning of Article 21. However, to a point, you're absolutely correct in the sense that whether that right to dignity also includes the right to dignity of the underprivileged groups, individuals and communities, is a critical question. So we have a right to dignity operating, but we do not know whether it is an inclusive dignity or an exclusive dignity. And overall, it was a brilliant lecture, and a lot of insightful observations being found. Moving on, we would request Professor Dr. Akida Khan, Associate Professor, Amity Law School, Noida, to proceed with her presentation. And over to you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rajat sir. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Asad, Dr. P.K. Sharma sir for congratulating me for my getting a new position, professor here in the Amity Law School. And then in the webinar series, first I would like to thank Dr. Aditya Thomas sir, Dr. Nitin for giving me this opportunity to speak on this webinar series organized by Amity Legal Aid Literacy Committee, and in collaboration with National Institute of Social Defense, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India. Today's webinar session on the topic, the social and legal status of transgender persons in India after passing of the Transgender Act 2019. Basically, the term this transgender has been derived from the Latin word this trans and the English word gender. Different sorts of individual come under this category. No particular form of sexual orientation is meant through this term transgender. The way they behave and act differs from the normative gender role of men and women. Leading a life as a transgender is far from easygoing because such people can neither categorized as male nor female, and this derivation is unacceptable to the society's vast majority. And the problems, different problems, generally problems faced by the transgenders are discrimination, unemployment, lack of educational facilities, lack of medical facilities, marriage, adoption, exclusion from social and cultural participation, exclusion from political participation. Transgender communities face a variety of social security issues since most of the transgender run away from or evicted from home. They do not get the support from their biological family in a long run, and also subsequently they face a lot of challenges, especially when they are not in a position to earn due to health concerns, lack of employment opportunities, or the old age. Some of the important issues and the concerns faced by the transgender communities in relation to social security, likewise, lack of livelihood, lack of welfare schemes, and the barriers to use existing schemes, lack of access to life and health insurance schemes even. The transgender are also excluded from the legal, clinical, and political rights. The transgenders are have the rights to vote in election as a woman or other, but the legal identity of the transgender people in the voter ID cards, which confirms their gender identity, is not clear. And thus the right to election is yet to be realized or achieved for them. So legal issues relating to transgender category are very complex issues for the people who change sex, as well as for those who are gender variant, especially for getting the legal recognition of gender identity as women or transgender as men was a complicated process, and still it is. As far as the points relating to the rights of the transgenders, preamble of our constitution mandates justice, social, economic, and political equality of status. First and the foremost right they are deserving is the right to equality under Article 14. And Article 15 speaks about the prohibition of discrimination on the ground of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. According to Article 19, that provides all citizens shall have the right, like freedom of speech and expression, to assemble peacefully and without arms, to form associations or the unions, to move freely throughout the territory of India, to reside and settle in any part of the territory of India, to practice any profession or carry any occupation, trade, or business. So all these rights are available. Even Article 21 that ensures right to privacy and personal dignity to all the citizens, right? One case referring to a landmark case that also referred by Dr. Asad, that is Nalsa versus Union of India. It is a landmark decision by Honorable Supreme Court of India that declared transgender to be the third gender, affirmed that fundamental rights granted under Constitution of India will be equally applicable on transgender, and gave them the right to self-identification of gender as male, female, or third gender. Moreover, the court also held that the transgender to be treated as socially and economically backward classes and will be granted reservation in admissions in educational institutions and in jobs also. Another remarkable and landmark case regarding NAS Foundation versus NCT Delhi. This is a Indian case that decided by the 2-judge bench of the Delhi High Court, which held that the treating consensual homosexual sex between adults as a crime is a violation of fundamental right protected by India's constitution. As far as the rights relating to the adoption and marriage, the transsexual women and men should have the right to marry, adopt children, and to be entitled to all legal protections that non-transgender people are entitled to. Presently in India, there is no legal legislations to regulate the transsexual marriages, and it is important that an amendment to be introduced in marriage laws. And as far as relating to the conclusion, or you can say suggestions from my side on the today's topic, that the transgender people, they should be treated equally, respectfully, and without any discrimination, and they should not be discriminated against in exercising their right to apply for job, access to public place, right to property, or their right to access to justice. And there should be a group of activists to whom any matter involving the transgender rights, as soon as it reaches the court, can be referred to this panel of activists, should involve the social workers dedicated to cause of the upliftment of the transgender community, and also the lawyers through with the law on the subject. And third suggestion is that shelter homes should also be made available for such transgenders who are facing the violence and are in further risk of going through the same during the proceedings. Fourth suggestion, the officials dealing with the issues relating to the transgenders should observe the complete transparency during such events. Thus, there should be establishment of division under a local legal services authority in order to provide legal aid to the transgenders, and will adequately serve this purpose. While reforms are needed and are suggested in the existing laws for the realization of equal rights for the transgender community, the target cannot be achieved if not fully, but partially, if reforms take place in the implementation of such laws. Thus, it is very vital that the judicial officers and the police officers, rather the whole society, do not become the means to institutionalize or to enforce such discrimination. Rather, they should spread awareness in the societal area or all over, that they work in and enlighten the laymen that the transgenders are as human as them and deserve to be treated in the same manner as every human being is. Thank you so much from my side.
Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Akida Khan, for your observations on the present jurisprudence and the present discourses governing transgender persons in India. And you had rightly pointed out to the social security lapses because because the government the act has been passed, the rules have been made. However, it is yet to be seen whether the government comes up with, both the state, central and the state, comes up with rules or with policies rather, with reference to social protecting their social security overall, especially with reference to, as you have indicated, their right to free legal aid, and because many of them cannot afford to cannot have normal access to justice. And of course, apart from that, the right to shelter and the right to access health insurance, and overall the right to livelihood. You also made passing references to the NALSA judgment, and rightly so. So the entire jurisprudence and the theoretical discourses that we are presently deliberating upon are to a large extent concomitant of the NALSA judgment, wherein the court actually had stipulated certain guidelines, and in the obiter it had actually pointed out the self-identification principle, and that the transgender persons are to be treated equally and reasonably, and they would be a part of the reasonable classification, and therefore would be treated as socially and educational backward classes, and may also be entitled to reservations. So overall, you had focused on a separate jurisprudence governing the present social and legal status concerning the transgender persons in India, and you have also made some important suggestions, which we all look forward, and we all hope that the suggestions actually get translated in reality. Without much ado, I would request the fifth and final speaker of this webinar, Dr. Jane Iyer Matthew, Assistant Professor, Amity Law School, to speak on the social and the legal issues, or rather the status of the transgender persons post the enactment of the Transgender Persons Act 2019 and the rules made thereunder. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Rajat sir, for the invite and for the introduction that you have given. Now, I believe this has been a long session, and several deliberations have already taken place in terms of the social status of transgender people, and also the legal aspects have been covered. Now, I don't see much that I would have to specifically cover, because a wide range has already been covered. Now, what I would like to cover basically is about the social status of the transgender people. Now, it all comes down to the part of providing gender identity to the transgender people. Now, initially, if we see, we've got the census, which is the only data as such which we do have pertaining to transgenders, which is of 2011, though it showcases that there are around 4.88 lakh people, that is transgenders, and that too in the age group of 0 to 6 in the same census record. We do have children between the age group of 0 to 6, which accounts for 54,000 children who are trans. Now, that itself is a huge amount or huge number. But then post that, what is seen is that we do not have any correlates pertaining to the transgenders. And we normally take, when we talk about transgenders, we always equate transgenders along with LGBTQ. So that is one of the difference which we need to identify over here, because trans people are different. Now, transgenders, basically, if we see, it is those who are who identify differently from the sex that is assigned at birth. Now, it all comes down to the two aspects which is there. One is sex and the gender aspect. Now, sex is actually a biologically determined factor, and gender is something which is a social construct over here. Now, this is where the whole ideology starts changing. Now, there are, when we talk about transgender, there is trans women, trans men, intersex people, and then there is gender queer. And over there also we have Kinnar, Hijras, Aravni, and the Jogtas. Now, all these are the people who qualify to be under the transgender people or the third gender, which was rightly recognized through the Nalsa judgment. Now, through that judgment, recognition has been provided, but then the question now pertains, or that remains, is that, is it sufficient, or has that provided the social status, or has there been recognition? Now, what is seen, because we do not have a census which was done later at a later stage, we do not have records or the statistics pertaining to it. Now, the only thing which we do have are studies which have been done by several agencies who have come out and said that even the 2011 census does not account for the actual statistics of transgenders who are there. Because in the identification itself, what has happened is that those who were identified as trans women were actually recorded as females in the census itself. So it is believed that there are more than almost 5 lakh females, even in transgenders in 2011 itself. Now, coming down to the social aspects, which are a problematic one, which is there. Now, the whole idea of recognizing the transgenders come from the NALSA judgment or the NALSA versus Union of India judgment. Now, this was one judgment wherein right of all persons to identify their gender was granted, which was a right which every individual has got, every citizen has got, you being representing your own gender of your choice. Now, that was a right which was identified through the NALSA judgment. Now, along with that, hijras were identified as the third gender. Over here, it is not the biological characteristics, it is the innate perception of one's own about their gender. That is what differentiates or classifies themselves as the third transgender or the third gender. And it was specified in the NALSA judgment that third genders are not to be subjected to medical examination or biological tests, as it would result in violation of their right to privacy. Now, this is one judgment which specifically says that medical examination and biological tests not to be done or not to be made compulsory, because it would be infringing the right to privacy. Now, coming down to the Transgender Act, which is there. Now, Transgender Act identifies a transgender if there is a sex reassignment surgery which is done. And that is the mode through which you can get your identity being made known. So if you need a identity card, it is that there should be a sex reassigning surgery which is done. But the problem is that, say for instance, it's a child who might be not happy or will not be aligning himself or herself to the sex that she has been identified or what was determined biologically at birth. And that keeps changing because of the age of the child. So there is a time span when the child would be, or an individual would be, at a stage of uncertainty. Now, there are others also who would identify maybe as a female, who's born a male, but then identify as a female, but does not want to subject themselves to sex reassigning surgeries, which will classify them as not a transgender, because once you do that, then only you get an identity card for being identified as a transgender. This itself showcases that you are actually not resorting to or understanding the perspectives of a transgender person. You are forcing them to actually involve yourself into the sex reassignment so that they can be identified as transgenders. This itself creates a problem in terms of identity. Now, another aspect majorly which is faced by the trans people is that they are being marginalized, and no one does want to speak to them or even be recognized or be even say that they are our friends. Okay. Now, this is majorly because of the stigma which is involved and the fact that we do not want to accept a person who is a trans. Now, any person who's a trans, we have this tendency to ostracize them, which results in them being marginalized. Along with that, there is social exclusion. It is said that inclusion is what is required, and we are trying to include them into the mainstream. But then when you are forcing a trans person to provide for getting a identity card to go through the sex reassignment surgeries, that itself is that you are not trying to include them into the mainstream. It's actually being forcefully being made such a way that they are being excluded from the mainstream. This itself shows that why should it be that they need a identity card? Because that itself shows that they are not included. It's actually an exclusion which is taking place. But the other aspect is that which is being favored is that why is it required to have an identity card, is that it actually helps out in terms of protection and for providing reservation. This is the aspect which has come out. Now, moving on in terms of the reservation, I'll come back to the reservation at a later stage. Now, the other aspects which the trans people do face is that it has an impact on the family reactions. Majorly, the family is not accepting such transgender people, because it is something which is demeaning for the family, their reputation, the community in which they live. And this all comes down to the fact that how is it that we would recognize our own child or our own siblings as a trans? So this, from the whole aspect of being excluded, starts within the family, which so when the family themselves are not in a position to accept them, then how is it that even an educational institution or friends or the community as a whole would accept? Okay, so this is yet another problem which is faced. Conflict and rejections are there. And then the problem is that once they are not accepted within the households, the end result is that they end up being homeless. Now, homelessness, which also adds on to the other problems which is there. They do not have jobs. Now, the only jobs which they would be having is that they have to work as sex workers, which is one mode of earning their livelihood, which results in having problems in terms of health, which is also there. Now, we've got judgments which are there, which are being instrumental in bringing out change. But then to what extent is it being implemented? That is yet another big question which remains, because none of those within or the executive or at the stage of implementation, they are not even willing to accept the fact that, okay, these are people who ought to be brought back into the mainstream and be accepted. Now, there lies the whole problem. And one such step which was taken for bringing them into the mainstream was that reservation be provided. Now, it was specified that the reservation for them through in the NALSA judgment itself, it was specified that transgender people will be provided reservation under OBC category. Now, OBC, that always would be falling under the socially and educationally backward class. Now, it is only among that category that there is a reservation for the trans people. What about the trans people who belong to the Dalit community or the STs? All those are actually being cut out altogether. It is actually as if you are recognizing them only among the socially and educationally backward class. So over here, what is required is that the trans community requires a horizontal reservation, which is, and that too within each and every class, not only for the socially and educationally backward class. Then only can we say that there is inclusion of the trans within the mainstream. or else it would remain that maybe one person who is a transgender from the education, socially and educationally backward class, who would be granted employment or an admission, that would not suffice. And they would be remaining in that community where they are going to be exploited, and they would not have a means for reviving themselves. So that's where the whole aspects would come out. Now, yet another aspect which is there in terms of the transgenders is that if you see in UK, what is seen is that they have this possibility of getting themselves to be recognized through the sex that they have acquired. Over here, it is not that. Over here, if a person needs to be recognized as a transgender, he needs to undergo through a surgery, through the sex reassignment surgery. Over there in UK, it is if they have acquired that gender, that gives them the recognition. It is something which is it is one's own identification which is coming out. It is their innate personal feelings which comes out, and that is what represents, or that is what gives them the identity. Now that kind of gender recognition is what is required, which in our society we are not able to provide because of the stigma which is attached to it, because of the community not accepting it, because of our religious beliefs, and because of the age-old formula which we have, that it is only the cisgender that will be accepted, that being the male and female, and not the transgender. That itself leads to the transgenders being ostracized and being exploited. Now you have the Transgender Act which is there. Now majorly what is required is that for the development of the transgenders, you need to accept them as they are. Not that you impose upon them, this is what is required. Accepting them and making them a part of our community, that will make a big change. So that because problems are always there. And that can be alleviated only if we take a step forward. And for that, you need acceptance. Now one of the problem which is seen in terms of the Transgender Act, which is there, is that now one such is that the reservation part is a major problem which is there, which is only provided among the OBCs or the socially and educationally backward class. Another problem is that if we see that who all are the transgenders, one category in that is the intersex. Now intersex can be identified even at birth. Those people who do not have the that is their reproductory or the sexual anatomy which does not fit to what they are born in, those are the ones who are identified as intersex. Now these are the people who have been identified among the category of children at the age of 0 to 6 to be considered as the transgenders over here. Now that itself is a recognition which we need to have. That itself now amounts to, if you see the 2011 census says that there are more than 54,000 children in that category. Are we able to accept it? I don't know about one, this is my personal information which I have. I had a friend, the individual was actually, the person was actually a female, but then the reproductory anatomy, it was not pertaining to, no, he was actually a female, but then the the thing was that he was born as a male, but then his anatomy was as of a female, which was not acceptable to him. And that was when he wanted to recognize himself as a female, which was not acceptable to the family because he was born a male. And it is believed that in our conservative society, we all favor males to female. And that was one reason which resulted in a lot of problems for this individual. Now, this kind of, what do you say, exclusion within the family is what creates a problem which is there. Now, another problem which is there is that the act specifies that there will be criminalization of sexual abuse of transgender. Now, what kind of sexual abuse, that is not specified. Yet another is that if there is any offense regarding sexual abuse of transgender, what it specifies is that there will be a punishment, but then the maximum punishment would be not more than 2 years. Why is this discrimination which is there? Now, sexual abuse, be it a female, you've got set of offenses which is there specified under the IPC, which says that for each and every offense, the same would be made applicable. Now, there itself, the whole idea changes because you do not consider even the transgenders as an individual. That's what it all comes down to. Now, another problem which is there is that rights in terms of marriage rights, adoption, all those are problems which we do face. Now, this being said, the major economic problem which is faced by the transgender is that they do not have jobs, no social security as such, and which leads them to being forced into the sex trade, which results also in them being affected with health problems. Now, these are certain problems which the trans people do face. And there is a need for the society to change, accept the fact that they are also human beings and that they also need to be mainstreamed and brought along with the rest of the people who are there. And that is what would make the change and will help in bringing about change in the social and legal and economic status of the trans people across India. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jane ma'am. Rightly pointing out different names, but all qualify as transgender. Through NALSA judgment or multiple judgments, as already being discussed by sir, by the previous speaker, you really pointed out that is it sufficient to get it justified through judgment only? And the count of census of 2011, even that doesn't include the transgenders. And you pointed out the social aspects also, which were leading into marginalized, or you addressed in a question to us, do we address them as friends? Are we able to accept them as friends? Or will I hesitate to go for the same? Inclusion is required, but if we are forcing for the recognition for certificate, it itself is something which goes with the exclusion of our approach. But this also goes with the positive approach, that is, it is leading into protection and reservation. Ma'am, you rightly pointed out the impact on the family reactions also, where even family members are hesitant to call them as a child or children or a sibling also, leading into demeaning of their own reputation. This is something which is of a serious concern. So exclusion starts at family. The conflict and the rejections are the most important aspects, which is leading into the end of the result as homeless. They are left with the jobs. No, there are no jobs except the sex racket which is going on, as sex workers are further leading into health problems also.
So we are bringing them to the mainstream. You pointed out their reservation is only limited in the OBC category. So again, we are not bringing the change in the horizontal way, which must be there. So ma'am, you led into us to think on that aspect also, who all are transgender. You emphasized upon intersex also, even that has to be identified, which can be done at the time of birth. To the another third problem, which you emphasized on the sexual abuse, followed by in the terms of marriage and adoption, still the problem is persisting. There are no social welfare benefits which are extendable. So going with the fact is from us and to all the people over here in general, we want acceptance, and that's what you lay down the emphasis to conclude. Acceptance of the fact has to be there that they are also human beings, which will bring a change. Thank you so much, ma'am, for going with the social insight of the same, where you dealt the problem and the challenges which we are facing towards the theme of this webinar, social and legal status of the transgender persons in India after passage of Transgender Persons Act 2019. Thank you so much, ma'am. All right. On behalf of Amity Legal Aid and Literacy Committee, Amity Law School, Noida, Amity University, in collaboration with the National Institute of Social Defense, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India, presents the webinar series on the protection of the Transgender Persons Act 2019. I extend my gratitude to Major General P.K. Sharma, retired, who is holding the position of Professor and Director, Dean Faculty of Law, Amity University, Haryana. I further extend my gratitude to Professor Dr. D.K. Giri, who is author, journalist, and political analyst. I further extend my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Dr. Muhammad Asad Malik, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. I extend my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Akida Khan, who is a professor of Amity Law School, Amity University, Noida, and to our beloved Dr. Jane Iyer, ma'am, Assistant Professor, Amity Law School, Amity University, Noida. Nonetheless, going with the special thanks to the convener, Dr. Nitin Sharma and Dr. Sumitra Singh, for going with this collaboration to hold a webinar series under the guidance and direction of Dr. Aditya Tomar, sir, our joint HOI, Amity Law School, Amity University. We cannot end up by thanking to our chairman, sir, under whose leadership we are going with the same, Professor Dr. D.K. Bandopadhyay, Amity Law School, Amity University, Noida. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for this wonderful session. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
With the permission of Chair, I think we can close the session. I'll just see if there are questions. All right. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
So,
you. Thank you, everyone.
all right.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Please close the, yes, please.